think our participant count has rolled in pretty quickly, pretty strongly. So we're going to go ahead and get started. It's 3 minutes in, and just start off with an intro on John. But first of all, I'm Zach Shahan, CleanTechnica CEO. If you've ever watched a webinar on CleanTechnica, you've probably seen me or listened to our podcast, Clean Tech Talk, where I interview CEOs of various clean technology companies on a weekly basis. John here became CEO of StorEn Technologies just last year in April 2022, but he's an engineer and entrepreneur with a wealth of experience, 23 years of experience developing, commercializing clean energy storage technologies. I think it's a perfect fit. We've been covering and doing collaborations with StorEn for quite a while, but I think you're a great addition as in the CEO role. Prior to this role, I know you worked as VP of Business Development for various energy storage companies, including 2 other vanadium flow battery development companies. So big on the vanadium flow bandwagon, not just right now at StorEn, but historically. When I say you were a bit further north, you were at Clemson University for your bachelor's in science in electrical and computer engineering. So I think that's the best intro I can give, but I'm sure you can give a much better intro of yourself. So could you just give us a few more words of wisdom on where you've been, what you've done, and why you're at StorEn today?
I appreciate that, Zach, and thank you so much for hosting this webinar. I look forward to sharing what we're doing here at StorEn. Just a little bit more of a background of me. I've been involved with energy storage for, like you said, 22, 23 years, mostly with flow battery technologies. I've also been involved with fuel cell systems and other types of even lithium. I've been in the, I've been involved with lithium-based technologies as well. But flow batteries really have been the core of my background as far as my is doing energy storage. Before that, I had another full career, 18 years in the telecom space, both as an engineer and in business development. So we're very excited that we have an opportunity to be in this space today. It's just absolutely the best time to be working for and with this type of technology, and we really hope to be a big player in this as we grow our company.
Yeah, timing is a fascinating thing in the matter of technology transitions, technology adoption. We'll get back to that in a moment. I just quick housekeeping from make the producers happy here. Make sure if you want to ask a question, use the Q&A feature rather than the chat feature, which is much easier for us to moderate. So yeah, use the Q&A feature if you want to toss us a question for later in the webinar. We'll keep an eye on them throughout the webinar too, in case anything is urgent or timely. Well, just to start off, I think, we got to start with the basics. What exactly is a vanadium battery? What's a flow battery? What's a vanadium flow battery? Just sort of tell us the differences between these things and especially compared to the lithium ion batteries, which I think people are more familiar with.
So, in a nutshell, vanadium flow battery is a really unique type of battery that uses the metal vanadium as the energy storage element. The official name of this type of battery is a vanadium redox battery. We sometimes call it a VRB, and for short, so how it works is vanadium is dissolved in a solution of sulfuric acid, and it's held in 2 separate tanks. In between the 2 electrolyte tanks is a device which is called a cell stack, and it's very similar to a fuel cell, if you will. It basically was developed from the fuel cell industry initially, and the cell stack acts as the engine of the system, if you will. There's a positive electrolyte tank and a negative electrolyte tank. They both have exactly the same formula of electrolyte in the tanks. One just becomes more electrically charged than the other. And so what happens is there's a series of pumps that pump the electrolyte on each side of the tank. The positive tank goes on one side of the stack, and the negative electrolyte is pumped on the opposite side of the stack. And they're separated, they're never mixed. The fluids are separated with a device called a membrane. And so what happens is an electrochemical process occurs in the cell stack that allows and causes the vanadium to release its electrical charge when there is a load on the system during the discharge cycling. And if you want to charge the battery, you put an electrical charge into the battery and it absorbs the current and it reverses the process, and one side becomes more electrically charged than the other side. And unlike other technologies, other battery technologies, there's no physical change in the system. In other words, the electrolyte and the vanadium stays in solution the whole time. It's not plated on any of the electrodes. And what that means is that the system stays very stable in its lifetime. It doesn't have the properties of a lead acid battery or a lithium battery where you have growth of the metal onto an electrolyte that you have to manage. Is a very stable situation. And so that's really what makes a VRB system so unique, is the fact that it's a very, very stable, long-lasting battery.
Yeah, and so as far as duration, I think this is one of the it's not like a deep secret or very complicated thing to understand, but it's also not what people just know right off the bat with batteries, is that with a lithium ion battery, you can't typically leave it for a very long time and use it for a very long duration energy storage. The energy sort of leaks out a bit more, and vanadium flow batteries they're made for this a little bit more, but I'm sure you could explain it much better than I can. So could you explain what it means to be a long duration battery and how that helps it fit into the electric ecosystem, not necessarily competing with lithium ion batteries as much as complementing them perhaps, and other storage systems?
That's exactly true. So the properties of this type of battery give it the capacity to do some things very, very uniquely, in the fact that this particular system can charge and discharge many tens of thousands of times, and it has very little degradation of its performance over that life of the system. And simply because, as I mentioned earlier, it's such a stable chemical reaction. And so what you can do is you also, since it's a system that has both a power system in it with the cell stack, and the energy of the system is stored in these electrolyte tanks, you can actually scale each one of those separately from each other. And what that means is, with a vanadium flow battery or any type of flow battery, you can, by just adding electrolyte to the system, you get more runtime and you get more discharge cycle time in that. You don't have to scale the whole system like you would a lead acid or lithium battery system, if you will, that adds more blocks, regardless of whether you are just trying to add more runtime. You have to add power to that as well. So you can scale this to applications to fit more economically with these specific applications. There is always trade-off, and the trade-off is a flow battery is pretty big and it's bulky. You're not going to see that this type of system is going to be in a EV, electric vehicle, anytime soon, with this. And that's really what we focus on, is applications that are a really good fit for this type of system. And that's really stationary applications, putting it on the ground where it stays there in a container or in its own containment system, and utilizing the battery on a daily basis. One last property of a flow battery that we take advantage of is you don't have to manage the state of charge of a flow battery. You can actually take all of the energy in a flow battery and use it and discharge it to zero energy. And it has no ill effect on the battery whatsoever. So once you charge it back up, all of that energy you have available, you can in fact use. And with lithium systems and other standard battery systems, there's always this management of what is your state of charge, because if you get below a specific state of charge, the battery becomes, or the system becomes, it starts to degrade much faster. So that's some of the properties that we have and take advantage of with flow batteries. And we have to really look at the applications very carefully to make sure that what we can do is going to solve the problem that that the battery is being used for.
Yeah, well, we've had 100 participants jump in here and five questions pop in. Going to leave some of them for later because we'll get back to them. Fred Dominigoni for sure has got some good ones here, but there are a few technical questions I want to pop in now.
Okay.
Going a bit off script here, but Eduardo Sa asks, are there any corrosion issues?
So the answer to that is no, because we're not, the system is a closed loop system, and both of the electrolyte tanks and systems have a small amount of pressure that it flows the electrolyte through the cell stack. So typically there's not an exposure to any outdoor or outside environmental gases like oxygen or anything in the system. So as long as you do not have any kind of contamination of the electrolyte stays, very stable for many, many years. One property that we use, and it's a management of the system over time, is we can actually mix the two electrolytes together and just start from scratch, where both tanks have exactly the same chemical makeup and molarity of the electrolyte in both tanks. And that pretty much does a reset of the battery. And we don't do that often, but it's a way that the system can reset itself to begin the process of utilizing the electrolyte safely again each time you use it.
Can we say that's sort of like restarting the computer?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So Brian Nori asks, so there's no ion exchange across the membrane that would degrade the system?
No, not to any great extent. I mean, like any battery system, there is some level of degrade, but the amount of degradation is so minimal over time that as long as the battery is not leaking its electrolytes between each tank, then it stays in a very, very stable condition.
Okay. And Alexander asks, what formulation of electrolyte is used in StorEn systems?
So we use a simple sulfuric acid recipe that we have some proprietary to it. We do not use what's known as mixed acid, which some of the other battery systems have used in the past. We've stayed in this particular version of our system, we are keeping the system simple, and we have a specific molarity with just sulfuric acid as our electrolyte solution with water.
So we have a good problem here. As we've answered some of these technical questions, we've gotten more. So we're just going to answer a couple more, then we're going to go back to sort of what I wanted to ask about in general. And then we'll have more Q&A at the end. But this is great to see the interest and the technical questions, which are fun. One more here from Sankalp Bothra. What is the charging discharging rate, the C rate?
Well, we don't really measure as a C rate. We have basically no battery is, well, let me back up. So this particular type of system does not have the capacity of fast charging like a lithium battery. And I tell you why. Because the electrolyte has to make contact with the membranes in the cell stack to do whatever energy transfer is occurring. So unlike a lithium battery or lead acid battery, where you can pump a tremendous amount of current into the battery and it will absorb it as much as possible before it either catches on fire or blows up, we don't have that capacity. It's based on the charging capacity is exclusively based on how quickly we can rotate the electrolyte through the cell stack to allow it to absorb the energy that is, available at the cell stack itself. So what that means is that the typical ratio is about 1.5 to 2 times the discharge cycling at its rated power. So if you have I would say if you have a 6-hour discharge cycle, you would require 10 to 12 hours for that battery to completely recharge itself.
Okay, we have a lot of questions. I'm just going to ask one more before going back to mine.
Okay.
I like this question though. This is sort of one I was going to work in. So this person, Mike Mendez, says, I think VRBs are great, even using the acronym here. What do you attribute to the fact that VRBs have not been adopted as fast as they should? Or
that's a great question. I believe, I've been involved with VRBs for, as I've said, 20 years. I was involved with 2 specific companies that were very close to commercialization. I believe that VRBs required a little bit more time to evolve technically for the level of reliability that's required in the industries that we are, trying to place these systems. If you look at the market today, there are much more VRB companies out there that have, with many people like myself and old colleagues and friends of mine in the past, that we kind of cracked the code on what the issues were. And the generational changes that have occurred in most of our systems today, including StorEn system, are based on experience and how we have learned how to design around issues that have occurred in the past. So I believe that the industry is very, very strong. It's still budding and growing. It's brand new. The demand is so amazingly huge that all of us will have a great level of success. And, one of the things that we're doing at StorEn is mandated by me is I want to deliver reliability. That's really what's key. I'm not forcing us to get into a market too early. We're testing and testing and testing and testing to make sure that our design is so reliable that we will in fact have such a high level of reliability compared to the other technologies that are out there. So
yeah, I mean, I mentioned timing earlier. We have an article today about Jimmy Carter's leadership as president environmentally. 98 years old he is. He pushed solar in the in the 70s as president. You can see it's 50 years later, and we're now, it's this year, it's predicted solar will account for more than 50% of new power capacity. This is, it takes time. If anyone who's been with CleanTechnica on its journey the past 15 years, we're 15 years old this month. Anyone who's been with us has seen the solar industry and the lithium-ion battery industry go from almost nothing, negligible, to major mass markets. And I think my perspective is that once you start getting into that competitive space and having companies that are able to deliver, like you said, reliably, able to stick through tough times and come out alive and on top.
Right.
I think then you start a scaling up process. It just helps everything, the ecosystem, the supply chain, all of this stuff just come to fruition. So I think it's very hard. We cover early tech, we cover tech that's on the market and commercially competitive right now, and there's different people who like different coverage.
Exactly.
I think it's hard with the timeframes involved in this kind of technology transitions to just understand why it takes so long sometimes when there is progress being made. So I'll just go to a couple of questions here on my side. So can you just give some examples of how flow batteries are used in real life applications, and connect them to things we know about and even if
there's quite a number of applications that are really pet projects that we've developed over the course of many years for flow batteries. So as we've mentioned before, what does a flow battery do better than anything else? You can scale to very long amounts of discharge cycling. That's number one. The other thing is you can use it every single day without any concern of degradation of performance. And so if you take those two attributes and you start focusing on things that you can use that system exclusively for, you're typically, your lithium-based systems have quite a bit of limitation as to how you can scale for long durations. They become very costly for long duration applications, where a flow battery, in fact, is very easy to scale for long duration. So we focus on those types of applications. I'll give you one of my very favorite applications in the utility space. As the utility industry in the United States and North America has aged, one of the things that has become a problem and has shown itself as a problem is the ability to upgrade those utility infrastructure very quickly. It's just not, you just can't do it. So in the case of, for example, if you have a transmission upgrade that a utility company is looking at doing, and to feed a transmission line to a small community, maybe that they have, a lot of rural electric cooperatives have this issue. In place of doing that upgrade, you can put energy storage at the end of the line. And what happens is the reason they're doing an upgrade is because these transmission lines are at capacity or over capacity. So by allowing the battery at the end of the line to charge during the evening hours or the hours that the line is not at capacity, and then using the energy at the site of where the energy is being used, and delivered at the site of where the energy is being used, you can bring the amount of energy that's being transmitted below its capacity. And so that transmission upgrade deferral is a fantastic opportunity for flow batteries. It means that we are competing against the cost of infrastructure as opposed to just the energy, the cost of energy in that case. So that's something that we're really looking at as far as larger scale energy storage. And of course, supporting solar. What do you do with solar? Solar only is available during the daytime, right? But you might not have the use of solar completely during the daytime. So you want to shift that use from the daytime to the evening hours. Flow batteries are great for that because, again, it's a daily use of the system. You store energy, the extra energy that you had generated, and you use it every single day at a time frame that you're shifting the use of energy.
So that's a good segue into the next question. I hear word on the street or your website, or is that you're getting into the residential. You bring out residential flow battery, vanadium battery. I think this is an industry first. Maybe you can clarify that, but there's a longer question from someone here that's related to this, so I think it's even better. I'm going to read it out. Fred Dominegoni, sorry for butchering your name probably. Hello from Arizona. I've been an investor for around 7 years and been looking to help beta test a home system with my current solar system, and or also purchase a system for backing up my computers and AC systems in the summer months during the evenings. I understand we should be getting close to being able to get a system as an investor possibly this year. That's the question. And he adds, I currently have a 13 kilowatt solar system. What are the consumer models going to be? And what version would work best with my system? I love these questions. This is way better than my version.
Well, that's a lot of information. I would love to share as much information about this. It would take probably a couple of hours, but in a nutshell, we are in fact developing a residential flow battery. It will be the first to market, we believe. It is unlike anything anybody has ever done in this particular space, obviously. The opportunity to deliver a vanadium flow battery in a residential environment has been a core element to StorEn since the beginning, even before I was involved. And as Fred will mention, he's been involved as an investor in the early days. I think we started actually, Fred, in 2017. So I don't think that's 7 years, but it's a good 3.5 to 4 years that you've been involved, and I appreciate your investment. We are crowdfunded, and our crowdfunding is on a platform called StorEn, and they've been a fantastic partner of ours. And there's a reason I'm sharing this, is because we have 8,000 investors. And I would have to say that a majority of our investment community.
Pause for the whistle. I shouldn't whistle. My tech guy will get upset at me probably. It'll probably mess up the audio. But I wanted to whistle because that's a lot. 8,000. Yeah. That's for vanadium flow batteries. This is
8,000 investors in our, in our community. I call them internally, I call them our tribe. And the reason they've invested, like Fred, is they want a vanadium flow battery in place of, or instead of, a lithium-based system. Again, one of the properties that we have that I really have yet to share with anybody, it's much safer. We don't have the fear of a fire, a lithium-based fire. But there is trade-offs, and the trade-offs are that the system is big and it's bulkier, and it has to, it's the laws of physics and chemistry. We have to contain a significant amount of electrolyte. So where we are in this process is we have a design that we are finalizing on that will allow us to build a specific type of system that could be and will be used in a residential environment. We still have engineering efforts in place to finalize this design. We're very comfortable with it at this point. We also are having to go through the standard compliance testing that any type of system like this would have to go through: UL, CE in Europe, CSE in Canada, that type of thing. So that's still on the docket. I don't want to share right now what our final specifications are. I can tell you we are looking at 2 different versions of our system, and they would have kind of a light version and a bigger version of the system, and that will be released soon. We also will have one of the things that I also
part of the question was about timing. So
as the timing, as we are getting closer to finalizing our design, we are also at the same time building the manufacturing capacity to support how to build these systems as well. And that's in parallel. No one's ever built a residential flow battery before, so we're having to invent the manufacturing process as well. So that's part of it. We have just released information about what we call a pre-purchase program. And because of all of our investors who have supported us in this journey we're on, we are offering the capacity to allow them to be first in line through this pre-purchase program. And we'll roll out more information. We have a planned time to roll out as much information as we possibly can and on the program as in the next couple of weeks. But basically what the program allows is our investors to have the opportunity to be the very first to purchase and take delivery of our systems as we begin manufacturing our systems. To answer your question on timing, I'm going to easily say we're going to take most of this year to complete all of the rest of the process of getting our system finalized in design, getting our UL compliance in order, and begin the process of building out our manufacturing capacity to support the orders that we plan to take. So
I imagine some of that timeline is just not up to you. You have to wait for UL or some other agencies to kind of go through.
That is exactly right.
Anyone who's dealt with basic bureaucracy knows, you're just in waiting. I imagine in this kind of case, you must really have a bit of a vagueness sometimes about how long it's going to take to get
that's exactly right. I mean, we're on track, and we have an internal schedule, and I've pushed our team as hard as we possibly can. We're all extremely motivated, And I would not have announced this plan if we were not very, very, very confident that we were, ready and very close to being able to begin the process of delivering systems soon.
So before moving to another topic, just is there anything about the crowdfunding, I think you said StorEn platform, that you want to add about for anyone to know, or that that you've experienced with it?
It's been very, very successful for StorEn. I mean, if you look at, we've raised approximately $10 million total on StorEn. Now, the thing with crowdfunding, you don't actually get that amount of money. You know, that's what we've raised, but there is a significant amount of cost to that amount of fundraising that we've done. We've had to run very lean as far as our company goes. If you look at our peers, companies that are even public or have already gone through some level of IPO where they've raised literally hundreds of millions of dollars, we're not at that level at this point. We will continue to need investment, and we have an active campaign going right now that is our fourth crowdfunding campaign. But the plan is that we will also look at other types of investment as we grow our company, simply because we will require a significant amount of financial resources to expand. And but as far as how we have jump-started our business, the very beautiful thing about our crowdfunding is that our investors are our customers. And I think that's the very biggest attribute that I could give to the crowdfunding campaigns that we've participated in, is we've built a customer base now that is waiting for us to deliver, and we will plan to be doing that soon.
Cool. So we have another question here from an investor, George Rovney. He's asking, do you believe yourselves to have first mover advantage in this technology? And can you discuss competitive landscape at a high level? So I think you talked about a little bit in regards to residential, but just in whether that or more broadly, what's the landscape?
So great question. And I welcome these types of questions because, the sweet spot for flow batteries are some of the applications, as I've mentioned before. They're more microgrid and grid scale systems. Our peers that are in this area have tended to lean towards building systems that are much bigger. My experience, to be perfectly honest, is the very big systems are very complex, and they are, they open up to some extent Pandora's box if you go and start to build a megawatt size system as your very first flow battery in a startup company. We're not doing that. We're keeping it simple, and we're going to grow into the space and grow our technology to support larger scale systems. We do have 2 microgrid systems that are being built now with a contract manufacturing partner, and those are scheduled for delivery in the middle part of this year to 2 industrial customers that we're working with. And those will be our first 2 systems as far as where we are competing directly with the other flow battery companies that are in the space. I believe that if you look at level of profitability, we need to be in that market. And the demand in the market is so great that all of us can be extremely successful and have as much business as we can handle over the course of the next 5 years.
Well, one of the top things we cover on our podcast is how the growing need for energy storage, particularly batteries, to scale up. They can't scale up as much as demand. The demand is there often in the context of electric vehicles, but it's actually stationary storage is also there trying to get as many batteries as possible. So it's an interesting point. So I'm going to go, Ray here has a question. What are practical discharge times for residential systems? And I think the second part of the question is asking, are you targeting the key advantage that diesel gas generators have over typical lithium batteries? I think that's the second part.
So let me answer the first question first, because I think that's a little easier for me to answer than the second question. I'll have to give that second question some thought, Ray. The first question is, if you look at the residential space today in lithium-based systems, your typical discharge cycling is really no more than about 3 hours. That's where the products are today. Our system will take advantage of the fact that we, in fact, can be a long duration energy storage platform. And we hope to double that in the power range that we're trying to generate. So the typical discharge cycling of a flow battery is 5 to 6 hours. And again, that would allow for the system to be, have a different discharge profile. It will take longer for it to charge, but you don't have to use all of the energy each time you discharge. You can use the energy based on when you need to use the energy. But if we as a typical design, if we said that we had a 30 kilowatt hour system and we had some level of power deliverable that would, be between 1 to 8 kilowatts, then that discharge cycling is anywhere from 12 or 3 to 12 hours, depends on the load. It really, really depends on how fast you pull the energy out of the battery. So, we're shooting at a 30 kilowatt hour system as our baseline. And so, you can do the math from there.
I think that's what you talked about, the ability to have longer duration discharge. I think that was the key with diesel gas generators. You can just run them. Of course, it's very costly, but you can just run them. And being here in Southwest Florida, we just got hit by Hurricane Ian very badly last year, and you have that issue of, well, how long am I going to need? How long am I going to need a backup? And I think that's when you're at that stage, you want to maximize the discharge time, and as you said, you can charge something up for a bit, leave it, come back. Also in that scenario, just throw in another question here with regard to the safety topic you brought up. So there were some issues with, overall batteries in this region delivered, they saved the day in all different ways during Hurricane Ian. But there were some issues with, I think, corrosion, some issues with flooding in some places. What's the situation for example, StorEn residential battery in the case of like severe flooding and hurricane?
That's a good question. Obviously, there's no platform, any electrical platform that likes to be flooded or have any kind of water intrusion. The containment of our system is really focused on trying to make the system as installed internally as we possibly can, and that's part of our design challenges that we have. The neat thing about our system is obviously there's electronics. There's a battery management system. There's inverters. There's a power electronics involved. It's a power generation capacity system. So all of that requires protection for the elements. But the cell stack, for the most part, the tanks, the pumps and plumbing, they're plastic. They're pretty much impervious to outdoor environmental issues. We, unlike other types of technologies that have a lot more metal built into the system, obviously we have cabinet and containment. Part of the system obviously involves that. We plan on having the ability to build the system, which would be in outdoor cabinets. We would prefer to look at ways of installing systems inside if possible. There's some limitation to the amount of cold weather that the system can handle, and so we have to keep that in mind. So still, that's part of what we are looking at as far as our finalization of our design process.
Just no, unfortunately, we probably won't get to all the questions. There's 39 right here, but be sure you can email the questions to accounts@cleantechnica.com if your question isn't answered, and we'll get back to you. A couple here I'm going to combine. One, Sankalp Bothra is asking, what's a typical O&M operation and maintenance over 25 years. Any human interaction required. And I'm going to throw this in at the same time. It's a bit different, but an anonymous person asked, is there an electrolyte lifetime?
So let's answer the electrolyte lifetime question first. We can only estimate because we don't have 25 years of runtime on any one battery. But as long as the system remains in a closed loop state and there's no contamination of the system, our expectation is the electrolyte will last as the 20-25 year lifetime of the battery. It's very stable. It does not break down. It's basically sulfuric acid, water, and the vanadium pentoxide, which is in solution. And with some other additives that are in place specifically with our recipe. But with that said, we would love to if there is a decommissioning of a system, we'll be happy to take that electrolyte back because we can recondition any electrolyte that's been in place and bring it back into a state of reusability very quickly. So that's something that's, again, a very positive thing about this technology. So remind me of what the other question was there, Zach.
If there's any human interaction required in that O&M over 25 years or so?
So there will be some level of human interaction required. Obviously, just physical inspection to make sure there's no leaks. The system will in fact have secondary containment in the fact that if there is a leak, we certainly hope to capture any kind of leak that occurs. Sulfuric acid has this great property of being very viscous, so it will find a way of leaking, and seeping, and we're working to completely eliminate that. That's part of our intellectual property that we've built into our cell stack.
But you can eat that with your cereal or waffles if you want.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But with that said, as I mentioned before, there might be the need to do a rebalance of the system on occasion, and that's something that's very easy to do, and it will be built into the system where we have the tanks mixed together and rebalance the system and restart the system from scratch. So that's what our anticipated O&M will be.
Okay, we're still at 39 somehow after answering those two. Just keep popping in, but try to go through some of these quickly. Brian Anderson has an interesting question. Are maximum charge and discharge rates more or less equal?
Rates. Okay, so when we're talking about cell stack based systems, as I've mentioned before, there is flow batteries do not dump current as quickly as lithium or lead acid batteries can do. For example, if you just shorted the system out, it's only going to be limited to a specific amount of current that the battery can process or the cell stacks can process. So we have to keep that in mind. The way the cell stack works is the electrolyte has to come in contact with the membranes before any ion transfer / energy deliverable or absorption happens. So it can only absorb or deliver as much electrical current as the cell stacks have surface area. Getting a little technical here, but with that said, the charge and discharge rates are the same as far as the amount of power that the system can generate or absorb. It will take a little bit longer for the system to charge the battery than it is to discharge the battery. So I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, I think this one, I'm not sure if you can answer this yet or not, but Bob Gates is asking, what are the physical dimensions of it? I think this is referring to the residential battery, weight as well as LWH, and for typical size, like 5 kilowatt hours.
We have yet to release that. Bob, we'll certainly, our plans are to release all of their technical information on our website soon. So I'll defer that question until we're able to do that.
Yeah, we never get big breaking news like that. You never get the juicy stuff. I mean,
not the juicy stuff.
Who would give it in an interview? It's like even risk investment issues. So I think this is is an interesting question. I don't know, again, if you can answer this one right now, but what's anonymous attendee is asking, what's the sweet spot for this kind of solution in terms of power and energy stored and the dollar per kilowatt or kilowatt hour?
Great question, because I've studied this most of my career trying to find that sweet spot, right? That's
I like that
that's the
question
holy
too.
grail of energy storage, is where, one of the things I would tell our investors is our challenge, our charter is to be a profitable company and to generate revenue that has high level of margin. So that is something that involves finding the sweet spot for the technology that you're delivering. There is a tremendous amount of value proposition in systems that are going into industrial applications. And that, includes microgrids, that includes utility scale systems, that includes looking at arbitrage for energy. So those types of applications are where we want to develop to. And obviously, the challenge that I've given our team is, we are building a smaller system to learn and build reliability. And as we scale our systems to much larger scale systems, the reliability will be inherently built into the systems. And therefore, we can start looking at offering solutions that are cost effective in the 10 to 100 kilowatt range and even larger, with plans for us to redesign our cell stack to be much bigger. We're actually on our roadmap we're planning on building a 50 kilowatt cell stack called the Titan stack. And that would allow us to get to grid scale utility applications where some of the other flow battery companies are there already. But our focus today is to build our systems focused on smaller scale, keeping it simple, building the reliability, and growing our company based on focused on profits.
Yeah, so I think you just sort of answered this question from Joel Klippel. Who or what is your target market? We also have a comment, but if you can add anything to that in a moment, if you want. We also have a comment from Ray, who's just ... residential and industrial systems ... So I think that sort of is answering the question, even though it came a minute before. It looks like you're looking across those, and then getting more specific, and then you can expand on that if there's other things you haven't mentioned. But Mihal Hadel asked, can the Vanadium BSS serve for grid applications, for example, for FCR or FRR balancing services? I think that's frequency regulation. I'm not sure.
Frequency regulation. It has a very fast response time, very similar to other battery technologies. I would venture to say that that's probably more of a competitive market for lithium-based stationary, simply because that market requires power delivery very quickly. Flow batteries are not power batteries; they're energy batteries. The applications that best fit flow batteries are when you have a very consistent load and you can support that load over a very long period of time. So we can do it technically, but the answer to that is there are other technologies that do it also as well or better than flow batteries. So we have to keep that in mind. We would compete. And that way, once we compete, prices get driven. And so we have to, pick or choose our battles. It's not necessarily the best use of a flow battery, in my opinion.
So we've gone through several questions. We're back at 39. So again, everybody email your questions to accounts@cleantechnica.com. One question here from Jacques is, where do you get the vanadium?
Great question. So vanadium is a fairly common element. It's a metal. I think it's number 23 on the periodic table. I might be wrong there. I haven't looked at that in a while. But vanadium is
Just
mined.
remember, it's the Michael Jordan of metals.
There you go.
If it's
There you go.
23, assuming it's 20.
And somebody might check us on that and say it's 26 or 29. I don't remember. But so the answer to that is vanadium is mined along with other metals. It's very common in aluminum mining and zinc-based mines. There are mines throughout North America. There are mines, a lot of, I get contacted by vanadium mining companies that want to partner with us, which is a great thing. We do have a relationship working right now as long-term relationship with a mining company out of Australia called Multicom, which is a public information that people can look at our website and find that information. Today, we are using an American-based electrolyte company that is processing our recipe of electrolyte, and we hope to continue to do that based on relationships here in the United States.
Sounds great. Mike Mendez has a simple question, but it actually opens up, sort of who the team is, who StorEn is. The question is, do you have any chemical engineers in your team?
We have chemical engineers under contracts. Specifically, if you know the history of our company, we have our facility here in the United States. And we also have an engineering team, which is our co-founder and engineering team in Bologna, Italy. And we have contracts with chemical engineering PhDs out of Bologna. I met with them 3 weeks ago, matter of fact. Very, very amazingly intelligent people.
Cool. And Mike Meehan asks, electrolyte seems like the most expensive component in VRBs. Won't any substantial future price reductions have to come from electrolytes? And if so, how might that happen?
That's an absolutely true statement. A significant majority percentage of the cost of any of our systems is in fact the cost of the electrolyte. One of the things that as a strategic partnership that we are doing is to look to partner with vanadium, mining companies or vanadium or companies that have access to vanadium that is above and beyond spot pricing where vanadium is used in the steel industry. The flow battery industry today is such a minute, small amount of vanadium that's being used worldwide for other things. As I mentioned, mostly in the metallurgy and steel industry uses 99.9% of the vanadium that's mined today. So, we are subject to the cost of, spot pricing for vanadium, but it hasn't been something that has slowed us down or caused us too much heartburn. As we grow and as we have a significant quantity of batteries that we begin to build, and especially large scale energy storage systems, which will require thousands of gallons of electrolyte on each system, we will really need to shore up those partnerships and find ways of having much longer term opportunities with vanadium mining partners. So that's our plan.
Yeah, I feel like it would be economies of scale that would come into play that would help drive down cost, purchasing power, negotiations. A few quick questions here. Is there an optimal state of charge? How long can it remain at 0% capacity, fully discharged?
Forever. It has no ill effect on the battery whatsoever. As soon as you begin charging the battery, the electrolyte, begins absorbing energy. It doesn't have any degradation where it is affected if you keep it at 0 state of charge or at a full state of charge. It doesn't matter in this case.
What would be the footprint of a 5 kilowatt hour residential system? Again, I'm not sure if you can answer that yet, or.
Yeah, that's something we have yet to release in our technical specs. So I'm going to defer on that one.
And Dean Himmelman asked, can these be used in residential backup systems? And I'll just answer that. Dean, StorEn has indicated they think they're going to bring the first residential vanadium flow battery system to market, working through hopefully by the end of the year, is what he said earlier. But you can listen to his full responses about that topic earlier in the podcast. We'll be sure to publish this on YouTube afterward and write about it. Up at the top, go back to the top, Drew Bellows asked, how do you compare VRFBs? We're getting all kinds of acronyms here now. To other
Vanadium redox flow battery. Good.
Right.
He knows that. That's good.
I like when you throw the flow in. Flow sounds cool.
Yeah.
How do they compare to other long duration energy storage devices, LDES devices, such as compressed air, thermal storage, or gravity storage? Of course, mainly in market and cost. How do they compare?
Yeah. So, of course, compressed air, gravity storage, water storage, which is, probably the oldest version of long duration energy storage. They're all megawatt scale systems. They require, their balance of plant is so incredibly large that they have to have an application for multi-megawatt size systems. Flow batteries have touched on that space in the past, in the history of flow batteries, and specifically in places like China, where there are facilities that have multi-megawatts of flow batteries in, a storage farm. We're obviously not at that scale, and it's going to take us a while to get to that scale. So there's no competitive element for us in that scale at that point, simply because we're not at that market, and we're not approaching that market today.
I'm going to go a bit, maybe 10 minutes beyond the hour here, just because we have a lot of good questions here.
Sure.
Can Mindy Miner ask, can you talk about what happens at the end of life for VRBs versus lithium batteries?
So, as you know, and one of the discussions that have occurred over the course of the last number of years is, what do you do with lithium batteries when they're worn out? Where do they go? Do they go into a landfill? Do they, how do they get recycled? That's not my problem. What I'm doing is I'm developing a 100% recyclable system. All of the plastics in our system can be recycled. It's just polypropylene plastic that's very stable with sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is used in thousands and thousands and thousands of industries and can be processed very easily. The vanadium electrolyte, if it's mixed as an electrolyte, as I mentioned before, I'll take it back and we can have it recycled or repurposed. So we feel like that we have to, we would make the claim that we are as the most recyclable battery at end of life than anything else out there.
Another simple technical question. Is there potential of the solution freezing in a cold climate?
There is the potential for freezing. And there is I wouldn't call it a danger. There is issues that we have to manage. What happens is if the electrolyte sits for any period of time in a very, very cold environment, the vanadium can come out of solution, and that's not a good thing. If it falls out of solution based on it being too cold, then it has to be reprocessed. But with that said, if in locations where we're considering very cold in climates, we can condition the cabinet to include heating elements in very cold weather. And the battery generates its own heat in its charge and discharge cycling. So for the most part, if the battery is operating on a daily basis, there is no issue or concern that the system is going to get so cold that you would have a condition where the vanadium falls out of solution.
Brent is asking, does StorEn have any current VRB BESS battery storage solutions operational? If so, where and what sizes?
We have in our labs, obviously, we do have systems on our labs. We have a couple of partnerships that we've worked that have rolled out a handful of systems over the course of the last 3 years. One is in Australia with our partner Multicom. We also have a system in Calgary, Canada, that we are working with a research and development entity. And basically, we do not yet have a commercial version of our system on the ground. The first ones will be the 2 microgrid systems we're building that are sanctioned to come out in the June timeframe.
I got a question from Alexander asking, is there silver lining to ESG, environmental, social, governance responsibility, compared to your rival lithium ion due to being completely recyclable? Do you support this statement or not? I mean, basically, I guess just a little more, ESG is a big topic, obviously. Do you feel like this is a big strength that vanadium flow batteries have over lithium ion?
I believe so. I mean, within the industry itself, and we do have, believe it or not, we do have communications between the VRB companies on how we help each other promote the advantages of flow batteries. And we're not in such a level of competition with other companies that we're trying to hide information, simply because any flow battery company that succeeds or fails helps the industry. And so as far as, we know there's just not the amount of history yet with VRBs in the on the ground for us to get a lot of information about end of life, simply because most of the flow batteries that are today on the ground and the planned ones that are scheduled to go on the ground have a life expectancy of 20 years. So we have yet to see that level of having to deal with what happens after a battery needs to be decommissioned and recycled.
Got a few questions here I'm going to combine into one or two. So Roald from the Netherlands is asking, first of all, noting he's even further east than us, indeed, and asking if you view material scarcity, and what your view is on material scarcity as vanadium flow batteries scale up. Related somewhat, someone's asking, Kara Lynn Garvok is asking, is vanadium sourced in the US? Is there adequate supply? And a third question, are you planning to manufacture this in the US or not?
So yeah, I'll remember the last question and go backwards.
Yeah.
So the answer to the question is absolutely, we're manufacturing in the US. We might use some level of contract manufacturing. Initially, our expertise in our cell stacks is still in Italy, and we're moving that to Greenville as quickly as we can.
So then the question, can you source vanadium from the US?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. Our source today is the United States. Vanadium, there's huge reservoirs or reserves of vanadium in North America, both Canada and North America and US. Probably the biggest ones, unfortunately, are China and Russia, but we're not sourcing any vanadium today except in the United States. So
that's, and then the last one was about scarcity in general. So I think, do you see that in the US or globally, are you concerned about scarcity issues as
we have? I mean, everybody has challenges in this industry for various things. I tell you, one of our challenges, I'll be perfectly honest, is the chip shortage is real. We have to use microcontrollers for our battery management system, and we have a design today that only to find out that our chip supplier has a significant backlog that I don't know if we're going to be able to work through. We might have to look at a change in that. So those are the types of challenges that anybody in our industry, including StorEn, has, is the very basic materials for the system are really not that big of a deal. We are using, like I said, polypropylene types of plastics for a lot of our devices. Pumps are pretty common. The tanks are pretty much off the shelf. Cabinets are specialized to us, but that's not any really big deal. But for the most part, the only things that we're looking at are how we reduce the amount of cost of our system based on scaling and volume. And that will be something that we'll continue to work on as time goes on.
There's a lot of questions here. I'm not even sure if I haven't even seen them all. I just want to end with, well, this is a comment from an investor. So Brian Anderson, I think we already asked a question from him maybe. He said, building small systems at scale is a great way to quickly bring down manufacturing costs and increase reliability. I like that comment, and it sort of leads into it does lead into what was going to be my last question for you, which is, you've spent a long time in this industry. So I imagine you've gone around from different research or, commercial and all different aspects of this industry. I'm just curious a bit more. I know you talked about it at the beginning, but like, what drove you to being here today? What, being at StorEn at this point in your evolution in vanadium flow batteries, and how much is that related to sort of maybe Brian's comment that this is a great way to scale, bring down costs and increase?
Sure. I appreciate the question. And I love it. I just love this technology. I don't know. I got into it, and I tell people, I don't know if it was by accident or by design, but as my career evolved and I, went from one company to the next company, I could continue to learn, and I continued, I was always on the business development side of it. And having the opportunity of working with StorEn as the CEO, it gives us, one of the things I tell people all the time is the best thing that I can do as a CEO is to be successful is to hire people that are a lot smarter than me. And I feel very confident that I've been able to do that. But with that said, also, we bring a huge quantity of experience to this project. Our CTO and the co-founder of our company, Angelo Donze, has over 25 years of technical design of flow batteries and fuel cells, the best in the business, hands down. And I bring a significant amount of my level of experience with the business development, with application development that I hope to be able to bring to the table. So we've got a great team, and it's one of these things where it's very hard sometimes to find the right people that are all working very, very closely together and are very, very good at what they do. We have that here at StorEn. I'm very excited about that.
Well, this has been great. We've gone 10 minutes over the hour, still have almost 100 participants, had over 100 for a while. It's, I think, really fascinating topic for a lot of people. There's over a couple dozen questions remaining, so just be sure to send those to accounts@cleantechnica.com. John, I just want to thank you. You've been excellent at answering this. This has been, I think this is the biggest and fastest stream of questions I've seen on a webinar, and we've had a lot of webinars. So I think there's really a lot of interest here that's going to hopefully propel you guys forward. And for anyone who's involved, best of luck. And I look forward to testing a residential storage system at some point. But
well, I look forward for you to doing that as well. It will, it's on the horizon. It's close. Thanks, everybody.
Comments? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would like to say just thanks to everybody for attending and for our investors to support us. It's we can't do it without you. Thanks again.
Thank you all.